We're going to start off by taking a very quick look at the QGIS interface. Now, like any other kind of GIS you may have used, QGIS has a lot of capabilities and it's packaged in their desktop tool. You could see here that you've got a general map canvas where we'll put some maps. There are toolbars that allow us to hit certain buttons and do things. We've got drop-down menus that also drop into other menus to perform all kinds of different GIS tasks. And in fact, we have a lot of ways to get to different things. For instance, you can see if I hover over here, this is saying it's the project toolbar. We also have a project menu that also shows us different things we can do. Many of those are duplicated. And some of these toolbars are dockable, so I can throw one right in here. And I can also pull it out. So let's begin by working our way through each of the different menu items and hit on the different aspects of the QGIS interface. So here as we pull down the project menu, you can see I can create a brand new project, which we've just done here. I can open, I can close projects. I can go to recent projects. So this is one of the ones that I had open and it will bring all the data in. If we come in here, I can close this project as well. And then it shows me some of the recent projects that I've used. If you've opened it for the first time, you won't have that, but I can, again, just double click here and bring in my project. We can also save a project or we can save it as another name. So I've got my layers in here, they're colored the way I want, and I can come in and give it a particular name. We can also make changes to a project and then say revert, and it says, do you want to discard all the unsaved changes? I can say yes, and that will take me back to my original project. And I'll have you notice, again, as we go through the project menu, you can see all the different things that we can do within the project menu, but here I have the project toolbar. And once again, I can create a new project, I can open a project, I can save a project, I can create a print layout, I can look at the layout manager, I can look at the style manager. So there's a number of things here that have more of your, what you might say, the common tasks that you might be utilizing. And then what I can do is I'll just drop that right back into its place. The more important thing for the project toolbar, which I really like, is the properties. So if I click on properties, this is going to get me information about the project. And now in here you can see there are a number of subcategories as well. So if we look at the general part of the project, we have the location. What do we want? Things that get selected, what do we want the color to be? We can change that color if we would like. We can also have a background color. Right now the background color is white. We can change that to blue. And you can see that changed back in here, but I'm going to go back to the default color. When we start measuring things, like using the measure toolbar, which I'll show you later, this is telling us the distance and the units that we can use for that. So if I want, I can use the measure toolbar and I can get information as it's meters or kilometers or feet or anything like that. So this is really convenient. It allows us to really impact the interface that the user is going to be working with. Also down below you can see I have information about my coordinate systems and the different coordinates we're using. So what are we going to be using here? We want to use the map units are in meters, or I can put it in decimal degrees as well and change that, or again come back in here and change it to meters. So this will display the coordinates in meters. And I love this as well, so we can have a source language that gets set up for the project. So that's just the basic general part of the project properties. If we go to the metadata tab, here again we can create metadata on the project. So when we hand this off to somebody, there'll be a lot of information that fulfills the metadata requirements that you might have. Moving down a little bit, we can go to the coordinate reference system. So here again, this tells me the coordinate reference systems that I've been using in the past. So this one happens to be using WGS 84, zone 18. I'll hit apply. So that, and what's really nice, look at this. This is just a really cool little feature. Which one is zone 18? And you can see it in red here. So it's showing us what that one actually is. I'm going to scroll up just a little bit, and you can see I've also used the Maryland State Plane Coordinate System in the past, so I can put that in. And this is great too. Again, it shows me what the reference is for the Maryland State Plane System. Now, just a reminder, a refresher, if you haven't done this in a while, this is not doing anything with the individual layers that we've been looking at. Instead, what it's doing is it's saying for the actual canvas itself that we're working in, we want to present that canvas in UTM, the UTM coordinate system, zone 18. I can set it up to WGS 84, so latitude and longitude. Let's move this over here, hit apply. And now you can see it seems to be a bit stretched out. The reason, of course, is we're using a geographic coordinate system. Let's go back to zone 18 and Universal Transverse Mercator, and now we're all set. So that tells us a little bit about the coordinate reference system that is being displayed. We can also look at the default styles. So what do we want to use for a marker? What do we want to use for lines? What do we want to use for fill? So we can actually set those. And then do we have a certain default opacity? Now later on I'm going to show you that we're going to go into individual layers and set opacity, but we could do this overall for the project. As we move down through, you can see under data sources, it gives us quite a lot of power over the different layers that we have added. In fact, I can set it up where I can use the identify tools, so I can click on fire stations or flood zones, or I can make it read only, so therefore I cannot edit the data. Also, we can make it searchable or not searchable. So these are all different kinds of things that you can do to create a little bit more control over your user base when they're working with your data. Obviously, anybody can go into the project pane, go to the data sources, and click off the read-only aspect of a layer. So many times I use this to protect things from myself, because sometimes I make mistakes. So I don't want to necessarily edit certain data by accidentally having the wrong layer selected when I hit the edit button, and then in some catastrophic activity, I wind up deleting everything. I just don't want to deal with it. So I can set certain layers up as being read-only. We can step down a little bit further, and at the project level, I can set up relationships within different databases. So here I've already set one up called comp_soils, and I'm referencing a component, the layer called component, which is a table. I'll show you that in a moment. I'm referencing it to the soils, and I'm referencing it by the key. So I think one of the things I'm going to do, and you can do this with me if yours is already selected, is I'm going to remove the relation, hit apply, and say OK. And let's turn on the soil. Actually, I'm going to turn everybody off except for the soils. We'll keep the soils on and zoom to a particular area. So I'm going to just take my zoom button and we'll zoom in. And I'm going to click on this big area right here. Let's make the soils. We'll expand that. And when I click on this, there's not a whole lot of information. It's got the key, an area symbol, right? So it doesn't really tell me much. But if I look at the component table, now I can see lots of information about the soil name. And again, if we scroll through, all kinds of information about its drainage class, its hydric rating, and so on. So I can come back into properties again, under project properties, and let's go back to our relationship class. Let's add a relation, and we're going to call this comp_soil, and we're going to then say we're going to use the soils as the reference layer, and the referencing field, we'll use the MU key. We can use the component, and we'll use its MU key, which is down at the bottom. Select that. So now I have a relationship set up. So there's my key. I'll hit apply. OK. And then let's come back in here and select another layer. So now when I selected the soils, look what happens. These are all the different components. So there's the Cayuga component. There's also Collamer, Hudson, Ovid, and Rhinebeck. They're all the components that make up this one particular soil polygon. We can look at this next one. This one is made up of these different component types, and it tells us quite a bit about each of them. So now with this, let's go into say this polygon here. So there's a very large soil area. So I can look at the Valois, and you can see that has changed. That's the component name, and again, it has information on its drainage classification and other things. I can look at the Erie, and that changes, or the Langford. So you can see we have now created a one-to-many relationship. Each of these soil polygons are related to many records in the component table. So again, it's another great way to create a project, have relationships set up between layers and tables, which will allow the user experience to be that much more enjoyable because they can click on a polygon and get all the information that's related to that polygon. If we keep going through, we can also have a set of variables. So here are global variables that are part of the whole project. You can see, again, my account name and the software we're using. So it's 3.63. I can click on project, and then there's information about it. So these are all the different things that I've set up. Got with the locations, and you can also add new variables. Again, so for more advanced users, you can have a lot of control over the user experience. For more advanced things too, there's the ability to create macros. And then finally, we're not going to get into this here. I might offer another class later. This QGIS project can actually be its own server. In fact, you can create a WMS server and WMTS rather, and WFS capabilities. So if you have a web server, you can throw this on or configure this project on the web server and serve your data up to your users. Now this is a real advanced thing, and it's not quite streamlined the way I'd like to see it at this point, but at some point I think we're going to see it get there in a much easier fashion. So we're not going to get into doing this today, but it is something to keep an eye on, that as the QGIS server begins to increase, these can just be placed on a server and then used by colleagues around the world. Wow, so that was just the properties of the project menu. We can go into some other things. So there's the ability to perform snapping. So how do we want to do our snapping? We can create, when we do some digitizing, how do I want to snap? I can do it with all the layers. We can set it up with vertexes and segments. So I can snap along a vertex as well as a straight line segment. And we can set it up to different ways of doing it. So in fact, under advanced configuration, I can say I want to snap to vertices of flood zones, but I want to, for school districts, I want to be able to snap to vertices and segments, or segments only. And again, all this is designed to create a really nice user experience. And this can be your basic template. So when you have a user doing some digitizing, they don't have to worry about all these rules. You can set this up yourself. There's even the ability to set up topological editing. So if I grab a line, if it's connected to another line and I move it, everything is going to move along with it. Or we can create automatic intersections when we snap. We're going to get into the editing tool a little bit later, so we'll look at that. But just let's throw this in the back of our mind to know that we do have quite a bit of power over the way we can interact with our data. And going through the project menu a little bit more, we can import our project. Now remember, this is importing our project, not an individual layer. So we can export, assuming not exporting. So we can import layers from AutoCAD, but we can export DXF layers. Eventually we're going to get into, like if I right click on flood zones, we can then say export. So I can save the feature as a number of different kinds of data types. We'll get into that later, but at least for now, we can do this for the entire project. And finally, as we go through here, we can see that we can create a new print layout. In fact, before I do that, let me zoom to the fire stations. We'll turn the fire stations on, and why don't we turn the parcels on? Okay, so I got the parcels that are color coded. So under project, I can then say new print layout, and I'll call this my test layout. And now I can start creating a map. So I can, in this case, throw a map in, and then I can also throw things like legends in here. And we're going to have a whole lesson on how to do the cartographic elements. This is just kind of an ugly thing now, just to show you that the capabilities are there to create maps. And that happens from the project pane. And we can create multiple print layouts. So what we're going to do next, you can see that that's a part of the project toolbar. What I'm going to do next is, instead of going to the edit menu, instead I'm going to move over with our toolbars, and let's take a look at the map navigation toolbar. Most of you probably already are familiar with how to do these things from other products, but I just want to show you again that QGIS has the ability to do a lot of fancy map navigation.